Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the AskIoT video series. I'm Ryan Chacon, and on today's episode, you're going to learn about the biggest challenges with IoT security. And I have with me Ryan Geisel, the CEO of Geisel Software, a custom software development company. If you are watching this on YouTube, please give this video a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and hit that bell icon so you get the latest episodes as soon as they're out. Other than that, let's get on to the episode. Welcome, Brian. Thanks for taking some time to chat with me today. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, happy to be here. Thanks for having
Yeah.
me.
Absolutely. So for starters, let's have you give a quick introduction about yourself and the company for our audience, if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah, I'm Brian Geisel. I'm the CEO of Geisel Software. We're a software development firm that focuses mostly in the Internet of Things and robotics. And so we do a lot across both the low level and the high level, connecting on the website, connecting to devices themselves. And we're based here in Massachusetts.
Awesome. All right. Well, so today our focus is to talk about the biggest challenges with IoT security, key considerations for IoT security. So let me quickly adjust our view here to give you the spotlight. And I want to ask you the first question, which is, what are the key considerations? Or sorry, let's start this way instead. Um, what are the biggest challenges when it comes to IoT security?
Yeah, I think some of them are just the total number of devices that are out there, and the device that you're building is going to be different than the device that anyone else has built. And so the challenges to your particular device are going to be unique. So versus things like the cloud, where we have a lot of solutions where we can solve it because it's homogeneous. It's the same kinds of stuff that we're trying to solve. In Internet of Things, we're using different communication mechanisms, we're using different platforms, we're solving different problems. And when I say solving different problems, I mean things like when we realized it might be a problem that we have access to software in someone's pacemaker.
Okay.
When the vice president of the United States had a pacemaker, we suddenly went, whoa, becomes a nation state level attack to it. Not only it's bad enough that it's someone could die, but now it's also someone could die who is part of the ruling party of a nation somewhere.
Sure.
So
Sure.
this is it's not just the security, what you can get access to or but now it's with Internet of Things, it's what you can control
Mm,
and or what you can affect based on that.
okay.
uh,
Yeah, I think one of the questions that always comes up is how to be thinking about security. So, obviously, there are different elements of building security into, or when to be thinking about it, how to build it, what needs to be thought about. But from your perspective, when you're having that discussion with a company and IoT security comes up, what are the things that you're really taking into account? What are the things you're really thinking through, focusing on? What are those considerations?
Yeah. So I would say, from the philosophical standpoint, you need to be. It's kind of a funny thing to address first with security, right? But you need to be really humble,
Okay.
because if you think my first solution to security is going to solve all my problems, first, you're wrong. Someone is going to come up with a way around whatever that first security thing is, and your arrogance will cause you not to have something behind it. And so
Okay.
you need to always be asking the question, when someone gets through my first line of security, what's my next line of security? And when
Right.
someone gets through that, what do I have? So you've got to be layering your security, that if I get access to the device, now what happens? Okay, well, it's encrypted. Okay, if I break the encryption, what personal data do I have on that device that shouldn't be there? And
Right.
so each of these stages, you need to think about the individual pieces in those layers. And then there's plenty of stuff that we can get into in the individual layers that you should be thinking about. But the first one I always say is, like, you need to think about layering your solution so that the first thing that falls over doesn't just destroy your market or destroy your company because you've lost it to that
Yeah.
security infiltration.
Is that responsibility, does that usually fall on the company looking to deploy the solution and kind of explaining, like, I guess, how does each party kind of play a role in the security and the development of ensuring that it's developed in the best way possible? Because oftentimes when people are building a solution, they're coming to it with their domain experience being in the industry, but they might not understand all the different technical components. They're looking for somebody or a number of partners to help put this together for them. So, whose responsibility along the way is it to really be thinking about and putting security at the forefront of those discussions?
It's everybody's responsibility.
Okay. Okay.
And I think a few years ago, we sent, so we're a software development company and we help a lot of companies who want to build their products, build their
Mm,
products. So
right.
that's where we kind of sit in the space, right? And so we are not on the IT side. We are
Okay.
not securing your cloud. We will help people connect to somebody that does that, but that's not where we live. Well, we sent a bunch of our engineers to Black Hat, and the first Black Hat big security conference.
Hmm.
And so the first session that some of our developers sat in, one of the presenters didn't believe that they were software developers. And they thought they were messing with them. They were, oh, yeah, of course, because everybody here is a software developer. They said, no, everyone here's IT people. There are no software developers here. No one sends their software developers here. And my
Right.
team was like, are you kidding? Like, how can that be? Like, how do you build a secure device? They said
Right.
they're not thinking about building a secure device. They're hoping IT will take care of it once they deploy it. And so
Yeah.
from right, so from that is true. IT needs to secure it as you deploy it. And so that customer that's deploying it in their environment, yeah, that's part of the we all have the responsibility. That customer needs to make sure they're being secure with their environment and being
Hmm.
smart about it. That's part of the layer. But as we build the device, we think it's so important that we are focusing on security as we build that device. So, what are we doing in the networking on the device? What are we doing to encrypt it? What are we doing to protect it against, seg faults and all kinds of stuff? And what are we doing because someone may have physical access to this device, which is
Hmm.
going to be very different than the way you think about solving problems in the cloud, where no one's going to
Sure.
have physical access to your server except maybe people you're paying to have access to it or that kind of thing. So
Yeah, and you mentioned something a second ago I wanted to hopefully dive into is the different layers that security kind of plays a role in how to be thinking about what's impacting what as you're building this. I guess to start with, I'd love to understand how like what are the key considerations when we're talking from like the device layer of it. So the device size, weight, power, etc. What matters there that influences security?
yeah, so this takes us to the other side of security too, which is the the most secure device that I could deploy, like technologically secure device I could deploy is a brick. No one can break into my brick, but it
Hmm.
doesn't do anything.
Hmm.
And so security is always going to be a balancing act because if I were to make it 100% secure, then my device is incapable of communicating on the internet and or maybe doesn't do anything at all. And so how do I find that happy, I don't know if it's a medium, but how do I find that happy spot between not doing anything and just being completely vulnerable? And
Hmm.
so I think that's one of the aspects, and where size, weight, and power you mentioned really comes into that is if you're deploying a device where cost may be driving you down to such simplistic processors and these kinds of things that they might not be able to handle encryption. And so that you say, well, we can't handle encryption. You can't even deploy the device. Well, it depends on what it is. If it's this device that sits in the middle of a bog and it's sending pH numbers, what
Right.
happens if it gets infiltrated? Well,
Sure.
I get wrong pH numbers. Is that the end of
Sure.
the world? Are there people out there who would care to send me wrong pH numbers? I'd be careful with that argument, by the way. That can get you in trouble. But this right yeah, this question around how important is that data and is the security of that data, and we're used to that data being very, very important and needs to be very, very secure, but I need to think also about the hardware that I'm deploying and the cost of those devices, where
Yeah.
that may influence the security that I'm able to have. And so if I can't encrypt, what can I do with that processor that makes it just not as easy as possible to get into? And
Yeah.
so that's where the size, weight, and power, power restrictions, the same kind of thing. They can restrict some of the capabilities I may have on the device. Thankfully, very low power devices are
Mm,
now starting to integrate into the ASIC the ability to compute the necessary encryption things that we use for HTTPS or
sure.
other similar encryptions. So that's really good, and that's starting to help that puzzle. But that's certainly one of those considerations that can come in as it depends on the particulars of your device.
Does that kind of play into then? I mean, you mentioned the pH, like being able to pull pH data. That kind of ties into another question I was having around the data requirements for a particular device or just solution in general. How does the data that is being required from the company or the end user, how does that impact how you think about security? Is it just kind of depending on how important the data is, how often it's going to be kind of pulled? Like as you mentioned earlier, what really was like the downside if something does happen to the data, or accessing the data. But how do you think about it from a data requirement standpoint, or I guess how does the different kinds of data influence how we think about security or prepare for kind of protecting on the security front?
Yeah. And the first thing is we're going to try to always protect it as highly as we can protect it. We'll start
Okay.
with that. But and there's a lot of good solutions out there that things like I mentioned HTTPS, they just exist, they work well, that we can use and run with.
Right.
And so use the simple things that will protect us always, even if we're just sending pH from a bog. If we can protect it and protect it easy, the cases where we need to start spending a lot more time thinking about it, and where maybe we will invest, on that balancing act, where we will lean way more into the security, is where we're dealing with people's private information, or
Mm,
especially where we're dealing with personal health information. In the US, we deal with HIPAA. There's various agencies throughout the world that have different requirements around health information. And
okay.
so you suddenly care at a different level about personally identifiable information and people's individual health information. And those are cases where you do your best to not have the data on the device. So can we avoid having this data at all on the device? And
Right.
if no, otherwise it's not super interesting to discuss on a talk. If we have to have it on the device, how can we keep it protected while it's sitting on the device? How can we keep it protected in flight?
Yeah.
And how can we make sure that it's on the device for the shortest amount of time possible? Those kinds of considerations with the data.
Gotcha. Okay. Fantastic. And I guess one of the last things I wanted to ask you here, and I'm going to bring us back together on the other view, for our audience who wants to or is has questions about security, is looking to understand how to kind of really start that journey, or maybe go back and adjust things that are happening on their end. What's the best approach that you have for them on how to just deal with IoT security kind of moving forward through a deployment, an existing deployment? Maybe that's a different approach for both of them, but just kind of overall advice on that front.
Yeah, I think one of the things is really start with security in mind when you start building the device. Think about it at the very beginning of your process. And then at the end of your process, once you've already deployed your device, you're going to need a way to update that device over the air. So it's already been deployed. The hardware is out there in your customer's hands. You need to have a way to get software updates out to that device. Our company has one called Nitrium. You can find it at nitrium.io, and it solves that piece of the problem so that you can focus on building your device, making it secure. And Nitrium will help you to get devices updated in the field so that you can constantly keep the security at the very latest of the security fixes that we know for the device, for things that you find, for things that get found in
Yep.
the industry, and so forth.
Right. Fantastic. Yeah, I think it's just important for people to know that security is something to be thinking about as early as possible in the process. And for a long time, I think it's been an afterthought, but it's becoming more and more of a primary kind of
Yeah.
element to all the planning, and that's super important to know. And I think a lot of the companies out there like yourself that are helping companies deploy the solutions are thinking about that and ensuring you think about it, even if you might not come up on your own planning roadmap. But for our audience who wants to follow up, ask questions, learn more about what you all have going on, what's the best way they can do that?
Yeah, for the Nitrium product that I mentioned is nitrium.io. You can check it out there. Or for any info on us, our web address is just geisel.software, and you can find contact info and all that fun stuff over there.
Awesome. Well, Brian, thank you so much for taking the time. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. This was great.
All right, everyone, thanks again for watching that episode of the Ask IoT video series. I hope you found a lot of value in it. If you did, please be sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel. It helps others find it and make sure that you get the latest episodes as soon as they become available. Other than that, if you have any questions or topics that you would like us to cover in this series, please leave them in the comments or shoot us an email at hello@iotforall.com. Other than that, thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next time.